Small businesses come in many different forms, from a dental office to a cupcake store. Regardless of what they do, though, there's a good chance they'll soon be under a new tax regime. Finance Minister Bill Morneau says he wants to close tax loopholes used by small businesses, while some of those small businesses say it's a disaster waiting to happen. It's time for The Big Picture. Sean Speer is a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Armin Yalnizyan is an economist, and Bill Robson is the president and CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute. So I'd love to hear from all of you whether you think the government is doing a good thing here or has made a terrible mistake. Let's start with you, Armin.
I think, when we talk about these things, people get kind of ballsed up about it being this major change to a small business taxation systems. What it is a major change to the loopholes that were introduced in the small business taxation system. Loopholes that did not fall off the turnip truck. They were introduced in the 1970s and then in the 1990s, and the last range of loopholes were in the 2000s. So if you're a legitimate business using these measures to actually help you grow your business, you're not going to have a problem. But if you're using it to shelter your income from income taxation, which you can do if you're a private corporation, then you're going to get dinged. And that's exactly what the Canadian taxpayer wants to see, is fair taxation, so that the single mom is not paying a higher rate of taxation on her income than somebody that is privileged enough to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of business income.
Is that a fair characterization of what's happening here, Sean?
I think there's some justification for the specific proposals on the table, but I worry a bit that the government's engaged in whack-a-mole. We've seen governments across the country at the federal level and the provinces raise marginal tax rates on individuals over the past several years. And surprise, surprise, individuals have responded. We've seen an increase in the use of these private corporations in response to the rising tax bill. In fact, the government's own discussion paper shows that the average difference between top personal rates and small business rates is 38 percentage points. It's no surprise that people are responding to this rising tax bill. And the risk, of course, is they close this loophole to protect the tax base, and people respond again, and they have to continue in this process of whack-a-mole. I think instead, the real point is, it seems to me, to step back and look at the source of the problem as opposed to these symptoms.
Well, how would you describe the source of the problem, Bill?
Well, I would certainly echo part of what Sean just said. The tax rates on high-income earners have been going up because we don't like high-income earners, or at least policymakers seem not to, or the people that vote for them. And the tax rates on small businesses have been going down because we do like small businesses, or at least policymakers like small businesses. But a lot of small businesses are owned by people who, at some point in their lives, may be high-income earners. And so as that gap's widened, the incentives to get more of your income into a small business have gone up and up and up. And I think that I'm sort of with Armin. I mean, a lot of tax policy experts will say quite reasonably, you don't want the tax system to be driving people's behavior. People should be making their decisions on all kinds of economic and other grounds rather than being driven by the tax system. But as the tax gap has gotten that wide, there have been a few things that are worth mentioning. First of all, if you're trying to save for retirement and you're temporarily in a high income bracket, good luck with that, because you can't put much away. And so that's one of the attractions of the Small Business Forum. Income averaging used to be something that people could use if they had fluctuating incomes, and that's gone. But now the tax rates are very high again.
Other tricks to keep our tax money, is that right?
Yeah, this has happened for a reason, and I do think, so echoing what Sean said, they're going to have to address that. And one final thing, I know what Armin wants to get in, the transition, it's going to be a monster, and I think that could be the thing that sinks a lot of these proposals.
You're rolling your eyes, Armin.
Well, the fact is that tax shelters have opened up for people that have had the money to be able to sock away. We introduced, in the heart of the recession, January of 2009, the tax-free savings account, which was rejected. That very model of tax shelter was rejected under the Bush administration 3 times because it privileged the rich too much.
The U.S. has something exactly like the TFSA.
But we introduced a brand new tax shelter. We've got the RRSP tax shelter. There's tax shelters galore. This is yet another way of squirreling away money. Basically, tax avoidance is exactly what happened. It's the Grecian formula. If you want to have a stable society, you can't have it so that the whack-a-mole game is catch me if you can. If I've got money, you try and tax me if you can, and leave it to the poorest people to carry the costs.
We've seen both the New Brunswick government and the French government have to roll back these increases in top marginal rates precisely because of the behavior behavioral impact that it's induced. And so that's why I really do think, well, there may be some justification to the proposals. I'm not against, or I'm not arguing against what the government has on the table, but it seems to me it's missing the point to the extent to which the real source of the problem is rising marginal tax rates on high-income earners.
But the other point that I just want to put out there is what we're talking about here is people who perhaps are not really a small business, but a professional, right? So we're talking about doctors, dentists, authors, anyone who is basically self-employed can call themselves a corporation and then claim this lower tax rate, whereas in fact they're not like the small business who is perhaps creating jobs and therefore maybe does.
It's not for the average self-employed person. It's for somebody with a lot of cash that has used up their RRSP room and used up their TFSA room and still wants to sock away money to avoid being paid taxes, because the average self-employed person doesn't have a killing to put into all those different sources. So we're talking about 50,000 families that are responsible for this stuff. And we are talking about families. We're talking about sprinkling income through your families, using your family members as tax shelters. And that has got to stop. Because a single parent, a single mother that is working 3 jobs cannot be taxed at a higher rate than a family making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year. It's simply not fair, and that's what the government's trying to shut down.
Well, I will make myself unpopular by saying that I think the small business rate is too low. I mean, part of the problem is that we continually lower that rate, so now the small business owners, they're going to be unhappy with me. But if that's the choice that we make, then bringing the hammer down like this is not going to be an effective way of dealing with the problem, because it is going to hit the mom and pop operations as well. And
why would it? Why would it hit them?
Because all of these
way.
rules about attributing income inside a corporation, I mean, this is where you get into the administration of it, and what has a lot of the small business owners really concerned is they're looking ahead and they're saying, when we are trying to cash out of our corner store or whatever it is, now suddenly the CRA is going to be in the business of deciding who contributed what to the business all through its life. So this isn't all just about people paying their university student kids a salary for work they didn't really do. There are businesses where people in families are pitching in, and all of a sudden they're going to have record keeping to figure out what everybody contributed. So they say there will be transition rules. Easy to say. I think that's going to be a huge problem.
This is the point that I'm trying to make, Diana. It's not to say that people shouldn't pay their fair share of taxes, but it seems to me we ought to do that in a clear and transparent way, as opposed to this whack-a-mole, which is a consequence of other decisions. The result will be now we're going to have CRA officials determining the reasonableness of paying one's family member. How do we determine, how do bureaucrats decide what market salary or market rates ought to be for these people? That ought to be left up to the market in a clear, neutral, and transparent tax system. And I think that has to get back to basics, looking at the rates that have been going up across the country for the past several years.
All right, well, we are out of time, and Armin still wants to really let you guys have it.
This really is a hot topic, so hopefully we'll talk about it again.
All right, thank you so much for being here, all of you. Sean Speer, Armin Yalnizyan, and Bill Robson, thank you.